We're continuing to see supply disruptions from climate change. We're continuing to know the importance of regulating components within our water. And I think, especially as conversations are happening around how can we deregulate, how might supply chain shift. I think in the water industry in particular, we have an obligation to use our voices to help make sure that some of these fundamental things are heard and maintained and enhanced in certain cases.
Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan. I'm the editorial director of the Endeavor Business Media Water Group. I'm joined today by Greg Newbloom. He's the founder and CEO of Membrion, and we're going to be talking about 2025 and kind of the impacts he's having on his business and how he's navigating some of the landscape that we're seeing, some of the turbulent nature of things, the on again, off again, especially with the recent presidential administration and how that's impacting his business and what he's doing to overcome some of the challenges and headwinds he's foreseeing. So Greg, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, great to be here.
Yeah. So there is this deregulatory effort that seems to be going on right now, and there, like I said, there's some on again, off again with some of these things, but it's creating kind of this turbulent market. But you had shared some thoughts on LinkedIn not too long ago about kind of the pros and cons that you're seeing. On the one hand, deregulatory efforts can be useful for business. On the other hand, we're in the business of public health, and that's kind of like there's this weird dichotomy of trying to navigate and find the balance there. Would you mind sharing some of your thoughts on that? Kind of like what you were trying to express with that sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big things is when industries, especially the types that we work in, are deregulated, it does create opportunities for them to be able to maybe move faster, expand faster, get their products out. But a lot of the industries also, as a byproduct of their manufacturing efforts, will generate compounds that are quite hazardous for the environment. And I really think from a public health basis, you have to look at the shifting cost aspect of it. So if companies are not having to deal with this waste and it's returning to the environment, that is ultimately going to have a public health cost impact later, that's borne by the citizens that are being impacted by that, and more broadly us as a society. And so in some ways you end up subsidizing some of what is the efforts that are happening, and there's a balance between ensuring that that amount of subsidies is at the appropriate level to make sure that business is able to move forward, but we also don't want to increase cancer rates in children. We don't want to increase these other problems that we know are just not going to be good for us in the long run, and often can be much more expensive to deal with on the back end if we kick the can down the road. I mean, you look at the PFAS issues that are out there now, and obviously we're not in that space particularly, but that is something that we're now having to grapple with the costs of how do we unwind some of these things because we didn't properly regulate them on the front end. So there is absolutely a balance to strike there, and I think that's some of the challenges. How do we meet that moment where we make sure that we're still protecting public health, but that we are enabling businesses to be able to thrive in a competitive market.
Yeah. Well, and kind of pivoting a little bit, one of the things that obviously has been a very big component of the Trump administration is the tariffs and how those are being presented. When we originally set this up to do the interview, the tariff plan had just been announced, so I was going to ask you how that was going to impact you. Now it's not in a 90-day delay. So I guess my question to you is kind of like, how are you navigating the some of the uncertainty involving that? Like having seen some numbers and knowing kind of what it was going to do, how was that going to impact your business? Now that there's a delay, how are you kind of navigating that? What are your plans? And it seems challenging to kind of plan right now, and I'm wondering kind of how you're trying to approach that strategically for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I think in some ways, thankfully, we're a little bit insulated from at least the supply side of the tariffs. Most of what we do is based in the U.S. from a sales perspective, and most of our supply chain is U.S. based. And so from that side of things, we're not as impacted. But I think that certainly our customers are, right, because we work with a lot of large multinational companies who are experiencing supply chain disruptions. And I think really for us, especially, and I think the kind of initial very high tariffs and then backing off, and now we're in this pause period, and what's going to happen. And China's ramping up. The tariff kind of war is ramping up on that front, but we're also seeing significant export restrictions from China. And I think all of these things ultimately lead to just a lot of uncertainty in the business. And so I think for us in particular, uncertainty generally has that impact where we see companies wanting to make fewer major investments in new infrastructure, things like that, because
Hmm.
that uncertainty, it's really hard to know, how long is this going to happen? Is this going to last for weeks, months, years? Is it going to change with a new administration in 4 years from now? But I think the reality is, there is does seem to be a broad effort to try to bring more manufacturing activities back to the U.S. And if that effort is successful, I do think that we'll see, existing facilities ramping up production. But in the midst of some of the chaos, I think that that chaos can often actually be a really productive space for startups like Membrion and others that are in the space, because we are able to be much more nimble than a lot of the
Hmm.
large companies. And so it gives us the ability to, as these companies are trying to figure out, well, how do these changes impact my ability to produce, my capacity? There are still regulatory changes happening at the state level, for example, in many places, and that forces companies to have to act under uncertain circumstances. And I think startups can do a lot of unique things that larger companies just might not have, at least immediately, at their fingertips to be able to do. So we actually see a lot of opportunity in the midst of disruption. I think historically, if you've looked at these kind of tumultuous times, you see that those really birth a lot of new companies and a lot of new opportunities, simply because it forces people to think differently than how they always have. And I think that's definitely true on the water side as much as it is in under other industries as well.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting that you say that. That I've talked to some other folks who kind of felt the same way, and then the other element in that whole mix is just the resilience of the water market on the whole. That you look at the whole S&P 500 and you see one picture, but then when you pare it down to just the water companies, you see a completely different picture that paints something that's much more stable and more resilient to these constant ebbs and flows that we're currently seeing in the broader macro economy.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that that's the great part about the water industry, is just it is absolutely essential. And even as certain, you may see ebbs and flows broadly from different, on the industrial side, different verticals may do really well in these sorts of environments, and others may really struggle. But water is used among most of them, and so from that standpoint, like, you may see shifts in where the demands are, but the demands are not going away.
Yeah. So we talked about some of like the challenges of navigating and planning around some of the uncertainty that we're seeing in the marketplace. But what about tailwinds? What about like the other effects that are out there? Are there things that you think that you can like, you can capture a bunch of wind in your sail this year in 2025 and that can carry you through into 2026? How are you thinking about things like that? Are there some tailwinds that you're trying to position your business to strategically take advantage of while things are uncertain in other areas, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as we look, we've had a significant focus in the semiconductor industry for a while. For example, we've got both Samsung and Lam Research as investors in Membrion, and opportunities there, especially with what's happening with AI, and especially the exemption from tariffs related to semiconductor and chip manufacturing. Expectations that those industries will continue to boom. The types of industries, there's a lot of types of industries, CPG, food and beverage, that have historically been quite resilient. In some of the, if we do end up in a recession. So I do think that, for us, as we look at it, it comes down to, there we do believe there are going to be significant tailwinds. We already see, some of those that are there, but it may require a nimbleness to shift focus, right? You may
Mhm.
see certain areas that aren't as strong as we thought they were going to be 6 months or a year ago, and others that will be even stronger. And so I think that for us, really, it's being able to have those insights, and that's where we leverage kind of the people around us to help provide some of those.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me, kind of sharing some of your thoughts and how your business is trying to approach the some of the uncertainty of the year so far. Are there any other thoughts that you wanted to share with the broader water industry as a whole?
No, I mean, I think for us, I think it's just important that we continue to I think especially in the environment that we're in, that we continue to kind of put forward a unified voice around the importance of water and the importance of maintaining the quality of water that's here. I mean, we're continuing to see supply disruptions from climate change. We're continuing to know the importance of regulating components within our water, and I think especially as conversations are happening around how can we deregulate, how might supply chain shift. I think in the water industry in particular, we have an obligation to use our voices to help make sure that some of these fundamental things are heard and maintained and enhanced in certain cases.
Yeah. I totally agree, and one of my other conversations was, getting back to that resiliency aspect. It seems like there's no better market to be in than water for job security. So,
Absolutely, so true, so true.
well, thanks so much, Greg. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and I hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
And for everyone who's watching, check out our video description below. We'll have some more information down there if you want to catch up on some of the latest news and some of the impacts on the water market, as well as some other video interviews similar to this one with a CEO in a business in the water market.